And that was a big success too. That was huge.
That was done completely off market, right?
Completely off market. You talk about marketing, you get to a certain point in any career, and I called 5 or 6 people, and I sold it for full price in a very down market.
Wow.
So,
not that long ago.
no, last summer.
Was it
No,
during
I guess
COVID?
no, it was right before COVID, the summer
yeah.
before COVID. So, summer of 19.
He can't decide where he wants to live.
Good for us.
It helps. It helps.
Well, yeah.
That was such a fun apartment because that's one of the great apartments I personally love so much. They're 3 of my favorite apartments, and they're all big apartments that lost their bedrooms. And just have 1 or 2 instead of 5 or 6.
Right.
This is one
Keep
of them.
all the entertaining spaces.
Right.
Keep all the entertaining space and just not have all that space.
Yeah.
Just square footage. Yeah.
That apartment had belonged to Chrysler and Mrs. Rockefeller, and has quite a history.
Wow.
What
I
was the one
remember-
that Carol Corcoran had at 740?
Well, that was the Enid Haupt apartment.
Enid Haupt.
And
That
Enid Haupt was
spectacular.
the sister of Walter Annenberg.
Mhm.
740 has a few penthouses. Such a big building, and that was a duplex penthouse. Again, all the glorious rooms. I mean, really beautiful terraces, and one bed, one. The master with a little room off of it, and that was a number of years ago. But we sold it 3 times for $27 million. First guy turned down by the board. Second guy turned down by the.
Wow.
And they were all qualified, but these were people who fell so in love with one of the most beautiful apartment I've seen, with in terrible condition, actually with holes in the walls. But it was one of those things. It was like a crumbling palace in Italy. You'd be tempted to just live in it the way it was. So magnificent. But people fell in love with it that had children, and the first 2 buyers, they're very qualified buyers. They each wanted to cut up the dining room, make temporary bedrooms for their children, who would only be at home another 4 years or 5 years when they were teenagers. And the board didn't like that idea.
Wow.
Right. It was about preserving the integrity of the apartment.
Yeah.
Not about who's living there, but about what the bones would be afterwards.
That's one thing so much fun about the old co-ops in New York. You're really talking in many cases like the equivalent of a mansion or a little palace inside a building. So unusual. Space you can't identify from the outside.
Absolutely. Sometimes in some buildings, you can see from the outside that the apartments are different because they're different height windows and things like that. So that's
Well, the
always
famous one,
fun.
the most visible one is the one you guys just sold 2 years ago, is the top of the Pierre. That is where it's on the top of the Pierre. If you look up, there's a French chateau with a mansard, and that is the top
It's just like
2 or
sitting up
really
on the
3
top.
floors, and you see the whole thing. I mean, it's the whole thing with a terrace in each corner, and it's the only apartment in New York that's 100% identifiable from the outside that I know of,
With those arched windows.
with
Right.
those huge, 27-foot ceiling from the living room.
So I don't know anything about any of these apartments, but as I was clicking through photos of apartments that you've sold, that one popped out. And when I saw that room with those arches, I thought, that's the picture I'm going to use for the promotion of this podcast, because
thank you.
I've never seen anything like that. And
I'm sorry we didn't have a photograph of the way it was when it first came on the market. It was not our listing at that time, but the owner was quite a collector of things of the entertainment world.
Memorabilia.
Marilyn Monroe and the dress she sang to JFK in, a number of Heisman trophies, the Beatles with their each of their instruments. He had bought all these things, and made the entire part of the apartment into a museum with these vitrines all around. With one
He had
room.
the Beatles Nehru suits. Remember
That's
that?
right. He dedicated various rooms to various either people or to certain industries, and it was quite spectacular. I liked
We-
it better when we had it, when it was more of a
Yes.
livable space.
I love to hear when the great apartments have great stuff, because it's
Yeah.
one thing to buy a great apartment. It's quite another to make it,
Furnish it, yeah.
it's the best it can be.
And then you're buying provenance in a way too. So that's sort of fun to show it that way, except that I have found over time that it's very distracting
That's
to
what I was going to
buyers.
say. The buyers spend more time looking at the things that don't come with the apartment
Right.
than at the actual
Yeah.
apartment they might move
So
And
we
into.
ended up,
sometimes
I think,
want
by
it.
Yeah, exactly.
By the time we did sell it in those photographs, that was staged because
Yeah.
we had to
We
take
moved
away all
everything
the
else
extra-
out so that they were looking at the windows and the ceiling height and
Yeah.
the key things.
What was that staging bill? The biggest staging bill in history, I think.
You know, I've blocked it out.
Several $100,000.
Several
That
100,000 a year.
is a great phrase to start the show. It's 4:03, and I love it when we get to start the show with a phrase like the biggest staging bill in
Ever.
history.
Gosh, I should have looked that up for you. I could probably
Exactly.
have said, but
This is a show about big things, right? Big, great things.
It was
I-
over $250,000. I remember that. It was
yeah.
$250,000 to stage.
Mhm.
yearly.
It was impactful. It
Yeah.
worked.
Yes, we needed to do that.
And you know, we sold that apartment in 1998 to the seller that was Mary and Leslie's client 20 years, 30 years later. We sold it for the highest price at that time ever paid for co-op, 21 million. Then Mary and Leslie sold it for 42,
44, I think.
44.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right, wait, I have to set the table. So the show is obviously about big things, but for me, I was excited to talk to the three of you because of a long history with the fabulous apartments. Roberto got excited about the apartments themselves. He started talking about specific buildings. We could take the show in either direction, but let's just introduce this as episode 24 of Burrows and Burbs. And I'm the country mouse, John Engel, out here in the burbs. Today, talking to you from Cincinnati, Ohio, right over the river from where Hall comes from, Kentucky. And Roberto is in his fabulous West Side apartment, where? 77th?
Fifth,
75th.
75th apartments.
Mm.
And
Got a hand. John drove 10 hours. He got up at 3 a.m. to get to Cincinnati. He's bringing his daughter back from college tomorrow just so that he could do this.
Very
Thank you,
sweet.
John.
Thank you,
That's
John.
so nice.
so, but I'm so excited about this show. I'm totally energized. I wanted to talk to Hall about a 34-year career, starting with 34 agents and now running 1,100 agents, and basically building a business, the greatest brokerage business in New York over a 34-year history. I think that's incredible because I've met a lot of agents I've met a lot of managers, but I haven't met any manager with that kind of track record. So I just have to say, I come a little intimidated because I don't know anybody like you. And so I want to understand all your secrets, and we only have, 45 minutes.
Oh my God. I don't have any except to show up and do it day by day. When I came to Brown Harris, there were only 34 agents. And guess who was there? Mary Rutherford.
Well,
So that helped a
I've met
lot to build
super
that.
agents on this show, people who have sold a great apartment. But when I dove into Mary's history and Mary's history with Leslie, it seemed to me that you sell a great apartment every other week, a 20 million this week. 30
We
million
wish.
next week.
Yeah.
Glad
COVID
it's
was
accurate.
not so good. You know, COVID was a bad year for us. And I know many
Exactly.
others were very lucky or not lucky, that just worked
Yeah.
for them. A
No,
good,
We've had a long dry season over
yeah.
COVID.
So we're,
Selling one great apartment is lucky, but selling as many as you have, and I mean, I counted at least 10 before I stopped. I started to get confused. But the Rockefeller apartment, the Pierre apartment, I mean, Roberto knows all the numbers of what Fifth Avenue and what Central Park West, but I was amazed by the pictures. All the eye candy. So I want to begin the show with with a track record. You guys have been doing this so successfully, both of you, for so long. What's your secret? We'll just start. What's the secret?
I'll tell you what the secret, I think this is true. Because one of your questions yesterday, which you sent, was, which is more important, technology or relationships? And in our case, for Leslie and myself, we were lucky that we're both native New Yorkers, obviously different generations, we're mother-daughter. And so we have a lot of contacts to begin with, but starting from those contacts, the most important thing by far is relationships. And I go back, Hall is talking about back when he first came, and I can't remember. Yes, I think that was before the computer. So for me,
we had computers. But
yeah, technology for me in the beginning was little cards, and we had a list every day of what was updated from, at that point, 200,000 to down to 175 or something. But every day I'd have to change my little cards. So technology has never been a big part for me. Of course, it makes it a lot easier now with resource and the computer things and what Brown Harris is doing. But we have, and my husband also is a trust and estates attorney, not that he could turn his clients over to me, that didn't work, but certainly it has helped to be introduced to other trust and estates attorneys. But that begins on the first deal. And after that, you want them to come back and to keep coming to you. And so relationships for us, I would say, are the most important thing, because the referrals are what our business is. It's all about referrals. And I think the referrals happen because we work for Brown Harris, and Brown Harris has been amazing for us in terms of providing us with the support that we need. Hall has been a tremendous partner for us in, I would say, most of those larger deals, both from the pricing, from the pitching, right through till the end. He's gotten to know our clients as well, and they know him. And then
Well, I'll just chime in though,
Yeah.
to say, as I'm looking at the screen, when we talk about the power of relationships with what we do, so much of it also is our relationships with the other brokers. These apartments that we're selling, we're not selling to strangers on the web. We are selling to clients of our colleagues in the industry. And I mean at all firms. Obviously, it's great to work with Brown Harris brokers, but we've worked with so many great brokers throughout the industry, and we rely on that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that sort of foundation with them. Makes a huge difference.
And I think just they know that they can trust us. They know we keep secrets. They know we don't go to the press. The press people hate us. I never have a
It's
comment.
very boring.
I almost never have a comment for them. I don't care if that's going to get me somebody else in business. It's not going to keep on the list of the referrals. So I would say that was the biggest secret for us. Hall,
I want to
would like
follow
hear
up
what you
on.
have to say.
I want a follow-up question to Hall. If relationships are everything, and the agent feels that she's making her success with her relationships and can take her relationships to another firm, what do you attribute your success in attracting and retaining all of these great agents with all of these great relationships who could go anywhere?
Well, I mean, guess what? The answer is the same thing: relationships. I mean, it's totally a relationship business, ours, in every aspect. It's my relationship with the brokers. It's our relationship with the firm. It's a relationship with each other, with our co-brokers, with our clients. The secret of Mary and that kind of success are personal referrals. There's never a deal that someone has done with Mary and Leslie that they don't come away with telling everyone else they know. If you want to sell your real estate, call Mary and Leslie. And that's the secret. Because their relationships are based on trust. It's all about what the client needs, discretion, and that's true at the high end of the market or at the simplest apartment. It's about trust and profession. And there's no one better than Mary and Leslie. And
we do lose listings, and I'll tell you, one of the main reasons we lose listings is we won't buy them.
We're too honest.
Way too honest. If somebody wants to know about what we should be asking, we give them a range. We say we think you should price near the top of the range, and over that, we'll be perfectly happy to see it go to somebody else and hope to get it on the rebound, which has happened. But I don't think it helps to promise things that you can't deliver on. And I can't say we've always been right on our pricing at all, but that's certainly the goal. And I think that's something that Hall has taught us the importance of being honest in pricing and giving a range.
Well, and
Yeah.
telling buyers what they've asked
Mhm.
rather than what we think they want to hear.
Mhm.
You know,
And
it's-
sellers too.
They,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and sellers, absolutely. You know, it's about giving our professional advice based on the current market, not about it's really going to make them happy to hear their apartment or their townhouse is worth X.
Mhm.
So
Doesn't
if you have
matter.
if you have an extraordinarily exclusive situation, a very, very private circumstance, and the owners really, they don't want anybody to know the address. They don't want anybody to know who lives there. And they're entrusting you to do this.
Mhm.
What is your course of action? How do you slowly start to unpeel that onion with trust to
Mhm.
that person? What's the first thing you call, the top 25 people what is give me a sense of what that looks like.
That's exactly right. And slowly getting it across to them that, well, actually the way we find that we can sell the best, and here is technology, is on the web with the photographs, because so many people are surfing the web and asking, they may not come to us directly. They often don't in the top echelon of properties, but they'll go to their own broker, and their broker may miss it. So we try very hard. Now, I think Hall has a better story for you on this, because I know that he sold a house that he couldn't tell anybody about. Well, I'm thinking of the one on 92nd Street.
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, I don't know how
Mary,
you did- yeah.
it is about, giving them the right advice and then following what it is that they choose to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you have to adapt. You can't just give the advice and say, well, you got to do this, you got to do this. You tell them your best advice, and then just like in pricing,
Right. It's
Right.
not take it
and
or
you
leave it.
accept what they want. But the story that Mary, one more thing I want to say before I forget, it's about knowledge, because we talked about relationships, but knowledge. And a great broker and a successful broker, it's not about information. We used to be the guardians of information. Everyone has the information today. It's knowledge, about knowledge. And one thing, Mary, I was thinking when you were talking about the old card systems before computers,
Mhm.
we all had more knowledge then.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
reason is we had to take those change sheets, pull out those cards, cross through the price or whatever, or saying it's contract signed. So we made the change ourselves, every single one of us.
Mhm.
And now the computer does it for you. So you can look it up, but you're
Mhm.
not doing it. There's something about doing it. Knowledge was greater than
Well,
about
it's like remembering
pricing.
a phone number. We all used to know a lot of phone numbers.
Of
Now we
course.
don't know
Now
any.
you hit a button. Yeah.
But Mary referred to a story, the head of CBS, retired head of CBS, 90 years old, wonderful gentleman, called me and said he wanted to speak to me. And he knew of a couple of properties that we had sold that he was well aware of. And the townhouse. So Paula Del Nuncio and I went to see him. And he said, this has been my home for 45 years. I've lost my beloved wife, and no one's allowed in this house. I said, well, not even the buyer? And he said, not even a buyer. And I talked about putting it on the web. I talked about all that. And it was like, no. And I want you because you can do it. And I'm like, okay. He didn't, nothing. And so then I said to him, but can we have an agreement that if we get an accepted offer, and he said, and I'm not negotiating a penny. I said, if we get an accepted offer, can the offer be contingent on seeing it? And he said, signing of a contract can be contingent on seeing it. And this is again about knowledge, and you can't tell anybody about it. Well, I was aware of a client that I thought could be good for this, that was working with 2 Brown Harris brokers. And I went to the brokers and I said, I've got to tell your buyer about something that I can't tell you about. It's your deal, it's your commission. I can't tell anybody anything, but I'm going to tell the buyer about it. And I had met the buyer and I said it to him, and I got a full price offer, and the contract was based contingent on his seeing it, and he sold it, and that was it. And that took 2 days. So what I thought was,
you remember
impossible.
what the price was? I don't remember, but at the time, it was a long time ago, so it probably wasn't a premium price, but
It was like 20 or
yeah,
something
but a
like that.
huge house.
Yeah, huge house.
Mhm. That was cool. Knowledge. Actually, going back to one of our earlier conversations, actually before we went on the air, if you will, Roberto, you were asking about, well, it seems like most of your business is on the Upper East Side. And over time, and because we have been so busy on the Upper East Side, and because we've had so many listings of prime ones on the Upper East Side, our business has been channeled more. And even though I'm very happy to go other places for the right listing, but I think that's the main reason that is that's where our knowledge is. Picking up on what Hall said, we really have the knowledge of the buildings on the Upper East Side much more than we do. Certainly on a lot of the West Side, Central Park West, we've had much more experience, but move farther west from there. And that's not where our knowledge base is.
No.
So,
And there are such great brokers who have expertise in that area that
so
we
that
find
we
it's
prefer-
best to give our clients to the brokers who are best able to care for them. in
And
each
our
of our-
clients appreciate that too, that we're not pretending to know something we don't know,
Of course.
because we're
That's great.
sending them to brokers who have that knowledge.
Partnering with somebody to gain their knowledge that you don't have is a big key to success.
Mhm,
So it's a mistake to go forward without the knowledge.
mhm.
When you can always find a great broker who has that knowledge and is willing to work.
Mhm.
Yep.
You were asking earlier what Hall's secret is to keeping brokers. And this is the story that in the very beginning, I told you I wanted to mention. We had been invited to make a pitch for the penthouse apartment at 965th Avenue. Hadn't been on the market in many, many, many years. And we were given 1 day and 1 hour, and it was either come then or you're not part of the party. And wouldn't you know that that was the time that the Brown Harris Stevens annual meeting had been scheduled, and Christie's had been reserved months in advance. The date had been put on to every office's calendars. The annual meeting, be there, required you come, such and such
Caterers.
day, such what?
Caterers.
Caterers,
Yeah.
everything is done. And Hall just took it upon himself to call Christie's, to call the caterers, to call all the other office managers and say, we can't do it then. And changed it to, I don't know, I think it was a whole month later, which
And
was the
Hall
first,
very simply said, our job is to sell real estate. And if this is what it takes, we changed the annual meeting.
and we got the listing. So that was the good
Yeah,
part.
I mean, I said, do we hold meetings or do we sell real estate? And guess what?
Mhm, mhm, yeah.
The owners were furious with me.
Mhm,
They had it in their calendars. It has to be, you have to pick a date. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry,
mhm,
And a good story about Brown Harris that I'm very proud of. So this was a meeting, and I knew the estate attorney, Mary and Leslie know her as well. And I had said, it's our annual meeting. Can I get another slot? She said, Paul, no. And then you go, okay, stop asking.
Okay.
But they had there were 5 or 6 executors and heirs interviewing in the building right across from here. And they had 5 brokers they had chosen to interview, one right after another. And
We were with
3
2 other brokers at Brown
We were
Harris.
with Alina.
yeah,
Oh,
three,
you were.
three,
Yeah.
3 of the 5 were Brown Harris brokers.
Mhm.
So I sat there, I went with Mary, and then I sat there and, talked about it. And then the next Brown Harris broker came in and Mary went out, and the next Brown Harris, it was amazing. And the executors were laughing. They're like, well, you come with each show. I
That's what
made
he
sure that
does.
what I said was the same for each,
Mhm. Totally
and,
fair.
but it was a proud moment, and we got it and we sold it for $70 million,
Mhm.
which at the time was the highest price ever paid for an apartment.
That's extraordinary. Now, how many showings do you get for something like that?
Usually not that many because it is so incredibly unique.
And we do
yes. Mhm.
pre-screen.
we have to
you can't
pre-screen
just
for
come
that, yeah.
for curiosity.
Mhm. So, and most people are people we've heard of, but Google helps a lot, but they definitely have to give qualifications in advance.
But-
And
Maybe
then,
20, do you think?
yeah, 20 at the most probably, but
20 at the
fairly,
most.
in a very short period of time usually because it's building on itself.
Yeah.
And actually that one, I think did go over the ask. That
It
was,
did,
yeah, I think we
yeah.
were
It did.
asking 60, yeah.
We were
So-
asking 65
Mm,
we went
mm,
for 70.
mhm, mhm.
But what is the, I have the parent of one of my daughter's friends has an extraordinary apartment, and he was telling me about a bidding war that he was in, and he lost a bidding war years ago because the person who won it said $500,000 over any offer, no limit.
Well, we
That's a
won't
pretty
do
hard
that.
thing to
We
me.
don't allow that. If we get to a state where we're saying it's sealed bids on Tuesday at 9, one of the rules is it has to be a hard number. And this particular lawyer that Hall was talking about, the way she's always done it when you get to a sealed bid is to deliver contracts to each of them. And everybody has to have signed that contract, and then she goes with the
They
highest
have a
one.
blank for
Blank for the
price.
price. Yeah, so they're buying into the contract as well as to the price when they do that. That's rare though. But
I mean, yeah, we've only done
He's a
that.
great attorney.
Yeah,
I
she's a
just
great
learned
attorney.
something. I love that.
That's
Yeah.
really,
It's
I
great.
love that.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's really
Put your
great.
money where your mouth is.
That's
I love
it.
that.
That's it. So there's
And
no
no-
negotiating
no-
a contract after the sealed bid. You've done it, you know?
no mortgage contingency.
No,
No.
Definitely
no
not.
mortgage, period.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about that, people outside of New York,
They don't understand.
they think we're crazy. What do you mean no mortgage? What do you
Right.
mean all cash? What do
All
you mean
cash.
I have to be approved? What do you mean?
Mhm,
No.
mhm.
So can we talk about that, some of the philosophy of some of these buildings? Because some of these buildings are extremely restrictive with regards to their desire to allow you to finance. Some buildings being completely all cash, whereby in today's world, we have people that are overwhelmingly qualified people with extraordinary jobs, with extraordinary income potential, that are young, that
Mhm.
may not have accumulated, say, the 30 million that a building wants to see in post-closing liquidity yet,
Mhm.
but they're precluded from even being considered it because they don't have that yet.
It's like Zachary and Tom are on the way
Is
home.
that not hurting the value of those? You know, I literally I was talking to a board president yesterday, and their building is, I think they allow 30% financing. And I asked her, because in her situation, she's like, they need to have $30 million. And I said, I just want to ask why.
Mhm.
Ask that. I just, it's a rare opportunity actually speaking to the board president. And she gave me an answer. I'm just curious what you guys thought or what you think of that.
We would ask the same question that you do. And I have been invited to board meetings to talk about it. And we're seeing that changing a lot. I think, and so much of it is, it depends on the building. And many buildings are so used to seeing such vast financial statements that it's easy for them to say it. Most of them, especially recently when interest rates have been so low and money is so cheap, they get it because they themselves would want to be getting financing. In a lot of these other ways of doing it, they can get a negative pledge or they can get the financing somewhere else so that, so they don't really need to have a mortgage. And that's certainly true about most of the prime buildings. However, even many of those now are changing to their financing. As far as what you're talking about with a young couple, that's where I try to explain to a board member if they'll talk to me, but primarily to buyers or sellers. When the boards, I think most boards are judging a candidate for the building, they're looking at where they are in their career. And if you're talking about somebody who's retired or about to retire, they're going to be judged on their assets much more strongly than they are on their income, and vice versa. You've got somebody who's really on the upward climb and they've already amassed a pretty good amount of money. Unfortunately, a lot of that might be in private equity, so it's carried interest. And, then you have to just hope that you've got a financially educated board. Sophisticated board. But we do find that most boards are doing that. They're judging according to who the candidate is.
It's not as formulaic as
Yes.
you might expect.
No, it really
I
isn't.
think in the better buildings, it's really not about a formula. It's definitely an overall picture of liquidity and income.
And job and,
Right,
they're
the
both-
full picture.
two incomes are one.
Mhm.
And often
Everything,
when they do pretend to have a formula, it's because they want to maintain the right to say it was a financial problem, when in fact, maybe there were other things about the way they were going to use the apartment, not necessarily.
I go Route 7 because I think it's better.
That makes sense.
I'm going to go Route 7 instead of West.
Her answer to me was, we make exceptions.
Mhm.
And I said,
Good.
but if that's not known to at least the brokerage community in some sense, you have a lot of people who aren't bringing anybody to your property.
Mhm.
So I
Gerardo.
think you should have a little bit more transparency.
I would say to you, everything Mary and Leslie said is 100% true. It's also true what you referred to. Extreme restrictive restrictions that a board places on applicants definitely has a negative impact on value and marketability.
Mhm.
I mean, that's why co-ops in many ways are, don't have the same value as condos. I believe that every co-op should and does and 100% should look for financial stability and financial wherewithal with comfort levels because they're a co-owner, and if they don't pay their bills, you don't pay. I think that, and they should look for someone of cooperative nature, but over years, some buildings have looked for more than that and had, imposed 3 times the price of the apartment in liquid assets when that doesn't even give any protection to them.
Exactly.
So definitely too many restrictions narrow your market. That is true.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the reason for doing.
Mhm.
Can we talk a little bit about the history of some of these buildings and the architecture and things like that? From, turn of the century, let's talk about, the Dakota. And then, one of the things that really interests me is just how, just a real basic thing is how ceiling heights just came down to the point in 1960 it was 8 feet. Who ever thought that was a good idea?
No one.
The developers, I think it was at a time when they were just trying to do mass building and they were, how many, certain height of the building and they were fitting in as many apartments as they could. And a lot of them were cookie cutters in the 60s.
Mhm.
And built as rentals also. Remember that, because I think if they're not built as a co-op, they're built to a different standard.
When we have listings with really low ceilings, I'm always wrong. I always think, well, we're not gonna be able to sell this. And there are people who like it.
Mhm.
There are. I mean, it's a big world out there.
People who like it or people who
Actually like it. I mean, they go in and say it's beautiful. They don't bother. It doesn't bother them at all. And I'm like, I want to almost go like, really? But of course you can't do that.
Yeah.
So it is you're right. It was done for economic reasons because the height was restricted by zoning. And then just as Mary said, they wanted to fit in more apartments.
Mhm.
Sure.
Mhm.
And what about, I'm going to bring up a floor plan here for 640 Park, which is an extraordinary floor plan.
Fabulous.
Can you see this?
They're beautiful. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
This has, and the way it was designed, it has 7 servants' rooms, 4 in the top left quadrant. It has a butler's room and a second man room and a servant's hall,
Mhm.
along with all of these other entertaining spaces, which are extraordinary. Now, nothing is designed like that anymore with those types of staff quarters. You might have, like now, even in all the biggest apartments that are being constructed, if there's I don't know that I even see a staff room. You'll see a 6th bedroom for a 6th child or a guest, but you don't see that. And you might see a staff apartment, and it's just really one apartment. It's on a lower floor, perhaps. Do you see any of this type of living coming back?
I think that regarding staff, certainly having help, there are a lot of people who have a lot of help, but the standards of the size of those staff rooms are unacceptable today to most people. They just are. I apologize for my phone. Some of them are so small. You have grand apartments, some are so small, it just fits a single bed. I mean, you have to kind of jump on it to get inside. So
And they were sharing bathrooms too.
yeah, and so I think many of them get knocked out to create one where possible. You're right that, and I also think lifestyle today, I think more people prefer to have their staff, even if it's live-in staff, living outside of the space, other apartment in the building or nearby, and to be able to attract the people to work for you, you've got to provide them with better accommodations than those apartments were built. That 640 apartment is such a gorgeous layout, has the most beautiful bedroom hall in New York. I mean, it's
wide.
mind-boggling. It's so wide.
You have to explain that to me. If I'm a young rock star and I'm looking at that floor plan, I look at it and I say, there's a lot of wasted space. I don't need all those itsy bitsy rooms. I want a big open plan.
Yeah, well, but I mean, about those itsy rooms, what many people do is knock them out, make them offices, offices,
One big
gym,
TV room.
you know, keep
One big
one
staff
for a
apartment.
baby nurse,
Mhm.
you know, that kind of thing people do.
Mhm.
But those floor plans, the principal rooms, not the staff rooms, but the principal rooms are so magnificent. And there are many people who haven't seen rooms like that, and they're a young rock star, and believe me, they want to live in them because they're
Mhm.
gorgeous.
The volume of the rooms are so.
The volumes, the proportions, you
Mhm.
know, yes, big open space is
That
great.
entrance gallery is 15 by 25.
And,
Right.
and all the
A lot of
principal
people's living
rooms are
rooms.
off of it.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
see that? And that's
Mhm.
what's so fantastic.
And
It's,
they all-
it's gorgeous. We've sold many of these. I think we sold at least 4, if not 5 of those, of that floor plan.
Reading Mary's history, it sounds like she sells that like every week. So.
Well, I guess I had a good writer.
2 a week, 2 a week.
Mhm.
So
No, many
another-
of our brokers have sold those, you
Mhm.
know, that's a great floor plan.
Mhm.
And those rooms get knocked out.
So another question I have. So how these apartments, a lot of these apartments, because, you know, say 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, most of these apartments along Park, 5th, Central Park West, they were kind of the only game in town. Now with all of the new construction, people moving downtown,
Mhm.
big billionaires row, all that. You know, if I took a client out in 2010, I remember we were looking for something not that size, but a little bit smaller. I think we were in the $10 million range. I probably could have shown him 7, maybe 7 apartments. Today, I could probably show him 30, 35.
Mhm. I think
And
that-
it seems like these apartments are suffering because even in this floor plan, the master bathroom is not overwhelmingly large. And
Mhm.
now the way people live, you know, men and women spend more time in the bathroom. There are ointments and creams, and it's metrosexual this and that and the other. And, you know, there's 2 sinks, a shower, a tub, 2 stalls, toilets. It's just enormous. These apartments physically cannot compare. How do they compensate?
On that issue of a master bedroom needing 2 baths and all that, and dressing rooms, you're 100% right. And in those very large apartments, they do accommodate it because they take 2 of the bedrooms for the master.
Mhm.
So they get a big sitting room, 2
Mhm.
bathrooms, and plenty of dressing.
Mhm.
That's how they're done. So, you know, if you need all those bedrooms and can't afford to take one, they just buy a bigger apartment. Because people today, you're right, most couples want 2 bathrooms, et cetera. They do that by adding 2 rooms together.
Mhm. Mhm.
So in this case, this bottom lower corner would be, those 2 chambers would be connected with a bathroom on one side and another bathroom on the other.
There you
Or
go.
else the
Or
other
the
one
other,
to
yeah.
the north, and you'd still have
Either one.
bathrooms.
Right.
Mhm.
Right, the
Mhm.
south and the north one with
Mhm.
those 2
Well, it's
baths.
still under closeted. I mean, that's what we're finding even out here in the suburbs is people buy great bathrooms and great closets, and they don't need entertaining rooms. the
Well,
way
but
Not the
those
staff-
bedrooms in these glorious, you know, Park Avenue, 5th Avenue, New York pre-war co-ops, those rooms are big, and people build closet walls, and it's still a bigger bedroom than you find in most other residences.
Mhm.
Well, and going back to those staff rooms, we have a new listing, and one of the original staff rooms is a dressing area / closet for the master bedroom.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
people really.
People, work around it.
Mhm.
As
And I
long as
think
you've
the
got
oth-
the space, you can do that.
And I think the other thing is when you're talking about so many apartments available all over the city, it's a big difference between condo and co-op. There's a big difference between pre-war and post-war, just in terms of, we're talking about the rooms at 640, the proportions, the architectural detail. And another huge factor is just looking into Central Park. And for that, you've got Central Park South, and that's it for the Midtown to downtown. Otherwise, you have Central Park West and Fifth Avenue. I think that's why 15 CPW did so well. They were able to merge the very modern with all the amenities that 15 CPW has, but also Robert Stern was smart enough, I think, to put a lot of architectural details onto the facade and even inside to merge the 2 aesthetics. And I think that's why it has helped. But
Right. And also 15, there's no apology for location. You know,
mhm.
many condos, new
Mhm.
condos, just because there's not a lot of land, you have to apologize. Well, yes, you know,
Mhm.
56 and 3rd is a great residential area. Well, not really, you know. So
Mhm, mhm. But that's,
15 was the biggest success ever and remains so in resales because a lot of new condos, you know, the resales are usually not as good because it's often people want the latest, the newest. But 15 is much like a pre-war building in that it stands all that.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
so compare Fifth Avenue to Park Avenue to me. Which is, for example, more exclusive? I would imagine that Fifth, because first of all, you have a view of the park and there's only half the inventory.
That's a lot of it, but I also have clients who don't want Fifth. They only want Park. And part of it is being near services. You know, for either transportation, or to
Just
walk
going to
from-
the grocery store.
going to Fifth Avenue to go find a grocery store,
Mhm.
assuming you're going to walk and not do everything by dialing with your fingers. People like both, and there are different kinds of floor plans. Fifth Avenue tend to be grander than Park Avenue, except you have 640, 740. There's a strip of Park Avenue that is super grand, but you get up into the high 70s and 80s and 90s Carnegie Hill. They're large apartments, but they just don't have the grandeur, the same proportions, right? So they're appealing to people who want to be in a neighborhood where the schools are. And there are people who wouldn't go to Fifth Avenue because of the lack of services, but would want to live near the schools and the other people their children will be playing with. So there's so many different motivations. And I think that's a nice part of New York too, that there are the varieties that can appeal to a lot of different aesthetics or budgets or whatever.
Mhm.
And we're happy to work in any of them. We know those.
So the big name architects are Emery Roth and Rosario Candela. First of all,
And J.E.R. Carpenter, I would put him in there.
what are the distinctive features of each of those three?
Okay. Candela is much more on the east side.
Sure.
And what would I say about that? Usually beautiful details, the mahogany doors, the bullet hinges, different floors and patterns in every room, floor plans that whether there's duplex, triplex, or simplex. We have a simplex one now that is practically totally original, which excites me because it hasn't been ruined yet. Emery Roth, I think, also had some wonderful interior details, but his details on the outside, much more of the wedding cake. As Leslie was saying yesterday, you really want to live on Fifth Avenue so that you can look at the skyline on the west side.
The Central Park West
the
skyline
skyline
is
is
much prettier than the Fifth Avenue one.
Absolutely. And that's Emery Roth versus Rosario Candela, perhaps. They're both fantastic. And J.E.R. Carpenter, I think, is not up there with Candela on the east side, but his floor plans are, again, really good at using the space to capture the best of the views that can be had from whatever the building is, and turning them into floor plans that really work and still having good flow, but also wonderful proportions. So I think for all of them, it's proportions. It's a sense of grandeur. It's the flow of the
actual layout
layouts.
is so important.
Yeah.
And where you land as you come off the elevator, which way you're going, the separation of the bedroom wing, little details that you don't see in many modern apartments where there's a bedroom on the left and the bedroom on the right and the living room straight ahead. There's a real, everything has its place. And it's an overused word, but they're very classic. Those architects.
And how do you feel about Robert A.M. Stern in comparison to any of the new people also?
As Mary was saying before about 15 CPW, he's done such a great job of merging the two in terms of what the traditional co-op buyer wanted in layout and flow, but with all the amenities you talked about before and the big proper primary bathroom and
and he's figured out what to do for the servants' rooms because he had the little
Anybody else?
Pardon?
Is there anybody else that now is in that mark?
Peter Penoyer.
Yeah.
Peter Penoyer. And he's done a great job. The building on 79th and Madison, completely sold out. Sold out.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. And they were wonderful floor plans and detail. He did the smaller one on 78th Street between Lexington and 3rd. What is that, 151 East 78, I think?
Yeah,
I think
and
that's right.
Stern is building one now across from it.
Yeah.
But I would say the two of them, it's a different standard.
Yeah, totally different standard. Totally. When you go back to the condos that were being built in the 80s, they were beginning to realize that the things in the 60s and 70s just didn't make it. They got it that the ceilings had to be higher. They got it that the finishes had to be much better, with turning to marble and whatever. Now they look dated to us, but at the time it was, wow, this is, bigger windows, all of that, that we began to undo the horrors of the 60s and earlier 70s. So it's getting better still.
John?
You want to play the game, the word association game, or should
Yes.
we keep going?
Yeah, now let's do that.
You like that? All right.
Yeah.
So we tried this for the last couple weeks and it worked out well. I say a word and then you say the first thing that comes to mind. And and I figure we can rotate from Hall to Leslie to Mary.
Okay, so Hall, you go first. Good. This is a Rorschach test.
I will fail this test.
No failing. This is just, free association. I will say though, that before we begin, that when I said Yankees and Beth said, yeah, don't really know anything about the Yankees. That is kind of a fail. So, some things you need to know in New York.
I'll just scream Hall.
So I was going to start with the Dakota.
Oh my God. The Dakota is with magnificence. I think of magnificence. It's just such a mysterious, fabulous building with, incredibly unique spaces. And I think it's mysterious. Mysterious and magnificent.
I like
The
that.
courtyard's beautiful. The entry's gorgeous. The gas lanterns. I mean, it's very special.
Okay, Leslie, Sutton Place.
I've just come from one Sutton. I was there an hour ago, but I'll say the word serene because of the view of the river. I think there's something that you cannot match than a view of water. So the reservoir or the river.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was my next one. East River, Mary.
I would not say serene. I would say boats, pretty, the people there, and this is not a one-word answer, is it?
Bridges. I love the view.
Activity.
Yeah, activity. It's bustling tugboats. I think that people are looking for activity there. I think that's probably a very, very good one. It's also remote. I feel it's more remote than Sutton is.
I also think that the East River, I think my word, if you'd asked me, was going to be flow, because because it is that connecting of two large bodies of water. It's so powerful. You look down on that apartments, and I'm mesmerized by that strength, and I have boated around and up and down the East River, and you really notice that strength. It is tough, even with, a powerful boat.
All right, switching gears.
Like New York, it's powerful.
The next word is Catskills.
Well, Catskills, I think of me, and I think of Mary and Leslie as well. I have a farm on the western slope of the Catskills that I've had for 32 years, and it's my emotional home. I mean, I love it. And I'm very grateful because Mary is in a chic part of the Catskills, not in farmland, but just very close. As the bird flies, I think you're 20 minutes away from the farm, but it takes about 45 minutes by car. Mary and Leslie have a family home there.
I refuse to do work in real estate there because that's my place I go to completely decompress. And I have no interest in mixing work and play there. So I can go there and my blood pressure immediately goes down. It's totally beautiful. We're right within this Catskill Park. So it's more hilly and wooded than where Hall is. But
I was going to say Beaverkill, but you just kept going. So all
no,
right.
I kept on going. That's right. Beaverkill is the
fishing.
name of a very famous fishing stream, and we're right.
I don't know that Mary and Leslie know this, but I also, decompress. And the one thing wonderful, our job is 7 days a week, but for me, I'm not really showing things on weekends. It's quick phone calls and emails, et cetera. So you can decompress and get back and take care of a cow or or horse or whatever.
Like, I know it's Leslie's turn, but just on this subject, I'd like to say one more word, and that's mafia. And that's because Hall's Farm was owned by a mafia, and our whole area was, they say trailer parks, but there are a lot of mafia in hiding up there as well. So it's kind of Profaci, our road had been called Profaci, and yours was the Joe Bonanno's.
Joe Bonanno's family owned my farm for 70 some years.
Mhm.
Still running the garbage.
But what I wanted to say is that because I'm in real estate and it's such a great community up there, and everyone asks me, and I say, I don't work locally. I don't work locally, but I have now sold my 3rd house up there without a commission, of course. This is a friend. People call me and they say, Paul, tell me. So I go, and I love real estate. And then I usually know people, especially in the last, year, so many people moving up there that I sold 3 of them as a friend, though, but not as a broker.
Mhm.
After this show, they're going to ask you to do it without actually
even showing up.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And so-
because they like the idea that he doesn't
Yes, the no
charge a commission.
commission for-
Exactly.
All right. Leslie, your turn. Date night.
Dinners in New York.
Dinners in New York. Well, I was going to say favorite restaurant. We could go with favorite restaurant.
Yeah. There I'm boring because I stick with very local spots, and I live in the 70s on the east side. So things like Le Charlot and Cognac and things that are close by are where I end up most often.
Mhm.
My children wonder why we're not going downtown. And I'm like, because I like being able to walk home after dinner. But
All right. Entertaining space.
Who's this for now?
Is it
Is
for
this
you?
all
You.
For me?
for
Or
Leslie?
For Mary. For Mary.
Oh, for Mary.
Entertaining space. When you think of entertaining space, you think
Are you talking now in apartments? Or are you talking about a public?
whatever comes to mind. Maybe your favorite entertaining space or your own entertaining space. What do you think of?
I like my apartment. I'll tell you that's a backstory too, because it's a very large apartment. It's on Fifth, not facing the park, so it doesn't have that. But it's a large apartment that we bought as a rec in the mid 70s and paid under $100,000 for. So I've always thought that it was kind of a gift, right? And therefore perhaps a bit of a duty to pay back. I love having dinner parties and things in my own apartment. It's just an easy place to entertain and people like coming. It's got great flow and the kitchen's not too far from the dining room. So everybody comes in there too. And I think, being at home to me is a real pleasure because I'm out
You have a
seeing
home.
all these apartments all the time.
Yeah, you have a great home to entertain in.
Yeah, no, so
Definitely.
I'm lucky. Yeah.
See, that's a perfect
Anyway, that-
answer for entertaining space. I learned all about it. Everybody ends up in the kitchen. I love that.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, Hall, there's a hard one. Doorman.
Think of service. That would be
Is it a
my
good
first
thing?
answer. Yeah.
Is it on the way out? On the way in?
Yeah, I think, it's great in New York to have somebody I live in a 4-unit co-op that's an old house that has no services. And I actually like that very much. And I don't know that I would move into a doorman building myself, but it is wonderful to have those kind of services. And some of our buildings, have doorman, elevator man, hall man, it's great. It's definitely a convenience. And I think a lot of people see it as security too.
Can I say
Definitely.
something about doorman again, just because I'm antediluvian and I've lived in been in this business for so long. When I started, there was no such thing as co-brokes. Everything was an open listing. And the only way you could get a listing was to get to know the doorman really well and say, oh, is there anything on the market in this building? And, oh, 8th floor. Oh, yeah. Now, is that Mrs. Jones? And you sort of get this
we're
game going.
circling back to relationships now.
Exactly,
But it all
relationships.
started with the doorman.
The doorman. And I now do know a lot of doormen really well. And that's fun. They know me on a first name basis. I know them on a first name. Hi, Mary, how are you? As you're going by a really good building. And I like that.
Mhm.
But that sort of shows you where the business has come from. And then you'd have to call up Mrs. Jones and say, oh, I hear you're selling your apartment. And that's how I ended up getting listings and selling them too. It was a very different way of doing business.
So if I'm
I
a
like the
young or
doorman.
even not so young agent on this call, and I've learned that knowledge is really important, relationships are everything.
Mhm.
And now I've heard about the importance of the doorman. One could infer that the best way to get new business in New York is to make friends with a lot more doormen.
True.
Doesn't hurt. It
Because
doesn't
you'll get
hurt.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You'll get knowledge about the market and,
Mhm.
and about the people in the building and what changes they're going through.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know, Brown Harris
Right.
in being a managing agent, you know, a sister company, Roger Tuckerman, who was head of Brown Harris for many years, would interview, sort of review broker specialists and, you know, find out how they're doing. And his first question of a broker specialist where he was considering, you know, maybe changing the broker is, what's the doorman's name? And if the broker couldn't answer that, they were off the building.
Mhm.
And then the second question is, because maybe they knew the name, Joe, you know, they may not know the last. But the second question is, how do they like their coffee? Because he said that, you know, you should know your doorman. You should know his coffee. When you get a cup of coffee and you're walking up that neighborhood, you should stop by at least once a week and bring him a cup of coffee and sit down and talk
Mhm.
in his office.
Mhm.
And he was right. He's all about what Mary's saying, information, and that's still very important today.
Mhm.
You know, so doormen are key. You know,
I think if somebody's listening hard to this podcast, they're learning a whole lot, because in an industry that is just so captivated by technology all of a sudden, may have forgotten some of these time-worn principles.
I think a lot of us have gotten lost in technology. I mean, technology is it's a great tool, but it doesn't replace anything. I mean, there are a lot of brokers who tell me, I don't go to open houses anymore. I don't need to. I can look at it in the computer. And that is information, the same thing their buyers have, and no knowledge. They have no knowledge. They didn't walk into 640 and notice that the bedroom hallway is the biggest thing on earth and it takes your breath away. And they don't know anything. They just have the same information. My biggest mistake brokers make is having technology be their knowledge base. It should be their information base. And their knowledge base comes from being there.
Yep.
It's a huge mistake today.
Just speaking to the other broker and being able to understand, how's traffic been? Has anybody, why hasn't this sold? You know, it's like the second bedroom, you know, there's an issue with the second bedroom or what, that's just, you're just collecting all of
knowledge.
Definitely. And that's also what Leslie was saying about making relationships with the other brokers. You can have a nice conversation, stick around for a while and find out what they have coming on the market or what else they've heard in their office is coming on. It's just, it's all
You
about
learn so much
from each other. Yeah.
Staying in front of a screen all day. When I see brokers who typically are at their desk and on a screen, they're not as successful as they would be if they would get up and go out and make new relationships and see things and understand and gain knowledge. So, the tools are great. I'm all for the tools, but they should be just tools for your convenience.
They're a supplement, but they don't.
They're supplements. They don't replace communication. They don't replace anything.
We just invited some brokers to see one of our new listings, and a couple came in from Sotheby's, and we were just so excited to see each other. And I think things really are loosening up from COVID too, so that if with vaccinations, feel more comfortable going and previewing apartments. It's been so hard not having open houses and not being able to preview, because again, how can you really encourage somebody to go see something that they might not have otherwise chosen on the web if you haven't seen it yourself?
Right. So we're doing broker previews by appointment now. We still can't do a broker open house because of COVID. But if you reach out to certain brokers and say, I'll be there at 11:30, can you meet me at, 11 or 11:15 or afterwards at 12? And they say yes. And they're excited to see it. And then you have a chance they learn about the apartment, but we chat and learn about what each is up to in terms of activity and what their buyers and sellers are, how they're reacting to things. I think you learn so much by just chatting with the other brokers, no question.
So someone asked in the chat, they said, recently the Real Deal mentioned boards can reject and they must show a reason. Is that true for all boards? I mean, do we have any commentary on any of that and how we feel about it?
I think that's still just a proposal. But
it's a proposal.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think it's a great
forever
proposal.
to do that.
It's a great proposal.
I think it's a great proposal because I do think that there's a lot of abuse in the process, and a lot of crazy things. I mean, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the city council had a proposed bill that didn't pass, but it had more things to it that I thought were great. That an application, if not responded to within 10 days, the applicant is immediately accepted. You know, this idea of being so rude to people and difficult, and you know, publishing your requirements. And you know, if someone is turned down, I mean, you're talking about someone who's told you can't live here. It should be for a legal reason, and a reason that they have a horrible reputation. You know, they're litigious. They're involved in many lawsuits. They can't get a decent referral, personal referral, or they're not financially able to, you know.
Or they're not using the apartment the way the building wants it used.
That's
They're
right.
gonna,
Or
you know, they're not
those
gonna
are
live
all
there, and
things.
their family is going to use it as a hotel. You know, that I get.
Yeah, I totally get that, because that's part of quiet enjoyment. You know, that's part of quiet enjoyment. But so I think if they can get rid of, I mean, you know, if you're going to turn somebody down, have a reason. It better be a legal reason. And today it's illegal, obviously. It always been for years. It's been illegal to turn down for those illegal reasons, like all the protected classes. But because they're private corporations, it happens and no one knows, and you can't prove it. So I think it's and I think it'll help tremendously the value of co-ops. So many people, especially today,
How many people?
you know, I mean, the, you know, older generations in New York, especially the high end of the market, very much so, you know, well, you should live at 730 or you should live at 770. I would only live in a Candela building, et cetera.
Yeah.
Younger people, even from those same families, don't have those same restrictions. And many people are just tired of the co-op process, which is often arduous. It's difficult. It takes forever, and it's hard to get answers. So I think COVID, I think that will improve values because more people will be willing to do it,
Second
go
page.
for a co-op. And I also think the other thing that's going to improve values of co-op is COVID. I think we as a COVID generation are going to be affected by the consequences of COVID, just like, you know, depression. People who lived during the Depression never quite got over it. They used to save things, fold the wrapping paper. And I think that one of the big things is that in condos, so many of the new condos are tall buildings with windows that are, you know, way up there, and many of those windows don't open. The idea of being connected to the earth, having fresh air, and et cetera, I think close to parks, et cetera, is going to help.
So Hall, in that scenario, just curious, let's in one of those buildings where they would like someone to have 3 times the value of the apartment after they close in liquid assets. Let's just say they reject this person because they don't quite have that. Would that be a legitimate reason? Because it's actually not reasonable.
It's not reasonable. And you'd have to be a lawyer to answer that question. I would say that if it's a published rule, I don't know that they can't create that rule. And whether it's, you know, as long as it's applied to everyone, I think it probably would be legal. But if it's not published, I think they could have a hard time with it. Because, you know, they tell me as a single gay man, you have to have 3 times, but they tell the, you know, the other guy who's got 2 children that they only need once. That is illegal.
Yeah.
So it depends what they do.
I have one more word association, sorry.
Go ahead.
For each one of you, it's just the Carlisle.
Bamelman's Bar.
I say heaven.
Heaven. Iconic. I love the outside and the inside. That roof.
Lit up at night. The view of the Carlisle is a really special thing to have. You know, if you have an apartment on the east side that has a view of the Carlisle lit up at night, it's really special.
That's right.
Lobby's so beautiful. I love, it's a great place to have breakfast, like a business breakfast. It's very elegant and intimate.
And such a great location.
Yeah.
Because it is in the center of a residential neighborhood, not in Midtown.
Small lobby. Yeah, but a great dining room.
John?
I just thought we would end up kind of with a wrap up, with a conclusion. I mean, I've heard about the great buildings on the east side. I've heard problems with co-ops, you know, and transition. I've heard about some of your favorite places and restaurants and where you escape to. So what's the future? What's the future hold for these grand dames of the Upper East Side? You know, the height of elegance, but of the old world. You know, we've talked about the change, the need for more change, the connection with the earth. So what's your prediction for the Upper East Side of Manhattan for the next 20 years?
Well, I mean, I could say, you remember that co-ops are 60-some% of the ownership market in New York City. When people say, well, no one's going to be buying a co-op, well, then there's going to be a lot of more homeless people, because I mean, it's 60-some%. You know, of this city is almost 70% rentals, and of the 30%, 60-some% are co-op, and they're not going away. And no one is rebuilding those kind of glorious spaces. And just as we talked before, there are parts of those glorious spaces that are antiquated and not so much for today's living, but they're easily adapted. And I think that they will always be popular. If you go in them, if you are, you know, if you've seen apartments like that, you can understand why even, you know, the 28-year-old guy who's just made a fortune on Wall Street wants to live there rather than in a white box. They make them white, you know, they paint them white, they put in modern furniture, but there's no place like them. They are by far, quality-wise, it's like talking about a Rolls Royce versus a cat.
And I was going to say, you made the point about location before, because the newer condos can only go where there's available land.
Right.
And the best locations have co-ops standing on their corners. So I really think that that's always going to be the
And I think people prefer residential, again, from co-op. It's just in general, but COVID too has affected that, you know, like residential streets with trees on it, you know, not commercial traffic.
And some of these apartments that we've been commenting on, the amount of space in them, well, there's a lot of work going on remotely now. So we're finding that some of these big apartments people are interested in because there's a place to make a proper office that is a beautiful room, probably a bedroom or a combination of many staff rooms. So that works. I think there are a lot of old apartments in some of these old buildings. And so we're going to be watching a lot of renovations going on, and that's tough because the buildings are tough on alteration policies and the buildings department is slow. But we are going to be seeing them turned into different spaces, keeping the best of the best. And I think that that's the combination. It's going to be, the spaces will be apartments that people can live in today's lifestyle. And that's going on. That has happened a lot already. So I see, and also we've talked about the private schools. Most of them are in the area of Fifth Avenue to Lexington or 3rd, in many on the Upper East Side, West Side too, but most of them are on the Upper East Side, or at least in the younger grades.
Wow. I mean, as a country mouse who knows nothing about Upper East Side, Upper West Side, it's all the same. You know, now I'm excited. I'm now excited about that.
We've got some things to show you, John.
Right.
You want
I was
to
going to say, come on in, we'll sell you something.
Yes, exactly.
For no commission.
No commission.
That's only Hall.
Yeah, exactly.
But all you need
For
to
the
refer to
doorman.
us.
Well,
Thank you, guys.
Roberto, you want to conclude?
I just want to say I'm so pleased that you guys were willing to join us. We learned so much and we really greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank
It's
you
been
for
so
having me.
interesting in meeting you and talking to you too. So
It's
thank
been
you.
a fun conversation.
Very fun.
And I think we've had 50 people, my screen tells me. We've had
That's
50
good.
people on this, which is great.
Thank you.
Nobody left. People kept coming, more and more
Yeah.
keep coming. If we do this in the second hour, I expect we should get an update.
Well, now, where do we
We have
go?
to go
from
sell
here?
some real estate in a second, but we
But
can
I
come
see-
back for the third hour.
All right.
Exactly. Good.
All right.
Thank
you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
everybody.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Roberto.
You too.
Thank you, John.
Bye, Joby.